Okay, are we back with sound? And please let us know in the comments section if we are audible. Silence happened there. I don't know why. So let's go back to the first question. Can you re-ask that question, Piyadasi?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it looks like we have sound now, so this is very good. So, Ajahn, our first question is from, let me go back to my live feed here. It is from Mark in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. What are your thoughts around esoteric Buddhism, such as the Yamabuchi ascetic mountain monks of Japan? Do you think initiation/rituals are important for enlightenment?
Yes, so esoteric is a good word, so esoteric rather than mainstream. I'm from the Theravada school, and it's more or less the mainstream traditional school from the time of the Buddha, as close as we can get in terms of the idea of the historical teachings of the Buddha. Most of the schools in Japan are Mahayana schools, later types of developments. And they have some very interesting practices there that have been developed. And of course, ascetic practices amongst monks, even in the Theravada school, are quite common. As far as rituals and initiations, the initiation for Theravada monks is actually ordination, is the initiation. And we have various stages sometimes before that. You can become what's called an anagarika, like a lay, homeless lay person, and then a novice, and then on to full ordination. And then there is 5 years of training with a teacher, and you must live in a monastery with that teacher. So those are all kind of initiatory practices. So the ascetic ideas of bathing under ice-cold waterfalls and etc. are alive and well in many of the different schools. And then there are those monks who don't do those kind of practices, and that's quite fine. The types of allowable ascetic practices are defined by the Buddha in the rules and disciplines for monks. Some things are not allowed. And if you remember, the school that the Buddha had originally come from was an extreme asceticism. So monks in India, non-Buddhist monks in India who he practiced with were doing outlandishly extreme things, which might even cause their death. So he was wary of extreme ascetic practices and forbade certain practices. And there are a list of 13 allowable ascetic practices which he allowed. None of them are too difficult or overwhelming. There are practices such as eating only once per day, eating only alms food, wearing robes that are collected from the garbage dump and sewn together, rag robes, in other words. Dwelling at the foot of a tree, in other words, outside, more or less camping. And the most ascetic one is probably not lying down to sleep. So keeping just 3 postures, walking, standing, sitting, but avoiding the 4th posture of lying down. And that could, some monks take this up for years at a time. So that's the type of allowable practices. And so, again, we're talking about 2 different schools, so we really can't, they're not really comparable. And so what I think of esoteric Buddhism or the monks in Japan is that I chose to practice in the Theravada school. Earlier in my life, I have practiced in the Tibetan school and the Korean Zen school, and I've chosen quite deliberately the Theravada, and particularly the Theravada sort of forest meditative structure, but with, in my own case, an emphasis on study of the suttas as well as meditation. So that's, in brief, a little take on that. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question is from Kaido in Bonn, Germany. Ajahn, is the sound of silence referred to by Lungpo Samedo what is commonly known as tinnitus, or is it another sound altogether?
The sound of silence is kind of introduced as a topic by Ajahn Sumedho and is best explained by Ajahn Sumedho himself. I do not practice that. I've had Ajahn Sumedho visit here and explain it to some degree. And I would hesitate to give much detail on exactly what it is. I don't think it's tinnitus, but because only people with tinnitus could practice it then. So it's something else. It's not commonly found in the suttas or even in the commentaries, but it is seems to be taken up by some monks. I personally do not practice it, and that's why I would hesitate to give a strong definitive description of what it is or whether it can be done even with tinnitus, etc. So I will leave that for now. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question is from the live feed from Neil. What are the signs when one has aroused metta in themselves? And does the practice really go deep, as I have doubts? Thank you.
Yes. Metta is described. Now, first of all, I highly recommend that you listen to my 10-day retreat on metta, which is found on the YouTube channel. 10 talks fully exploring two particular suttas, the two most important central suttas by the Buddha on metta. And the first one is the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness. And there you will find 6 or 7 or 8 talks in a row analyzing and describing what the Buddha is talking about, and every word of that sutta I'm exploring, and including how it feels, what the description of metta is. And metta can go very deep. In fact, it is a topic which can be used to attain what is called Samadhi or jhana, which is the 8th factor of the Eightfold Path. The eighth factor of the Eightfold Path is called Samma Samadhi and consists primarily of 4 jhanas, or deep states of immersion and absorption. And each state from 1 to 4 gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And so metta can be applied to this. And so you can soak and absolutely immerse yourself in loving kindness. And to the extent where all discursive thought processes cease, and one is just bathed in the blissful, extraordinarily blissful feeling of metta, of loving kindness. And it is highly advised to practice. It's one of the practices also that is hard to go wrong with. It's not intrinsically dangerous or anything like this. So it's very widely taught and can be very profound and alter one's life and view on reality in a very profound way. It is very highly recommended, and I say I've given that one particular retreat on metta. I've given many retreats on metta, but there are dozens of talks, perhaps by me, on the YouTube channel around this topic of metta, and to explore it in depth, and perhaps even guide you into it or encourage you into it as well. So that's a brief answer to a something that can be a lifelong practice. Okay, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from No One Everyone in Iran. Dear Bhante, how does one know for certain about their stage of enlightenment? Could the absence of corresponding fetters and a glimpse of the deathless count as a reliable measure to ensure that there will no longer be taking any lower rebirth?
Well, this is an area that is somewhat difficult to give you precise assessments on. So we haven't yet invented a ring or a watch that tells you what stage of enlightenment you're in. But the basics of assessing it are very plain and clear in the suttas. And I also have given talks on this, so there is a talk on the YouTube channel called The Stages of Enlightenment, in which I talk about each of the 4 traditional stages of enlightenment and what happens in each of those stages and how you could recognize whether a person is of one of these 4 stages of enlightenment. It's marvelously described by the Buddha. Quite often the word enlightenment is a very vague and general term, and it's applied in all kinds of things to all kinds of different ideas, including political ideas and social ideas, etc. So we want, and other religions use the word as well. So it's just an English word that gets bandied around. But Theravada Buddhism in particular has some very clear definitions of what it is and what do we call the fetters, the deep latent tendencies, which are 10 in number. They dissolve or are uprooted in a systematic way in each stage of the practice. And so one needs to look into this, but people can easily fool themselves. So one can easily not recognize that they still have some of these deep tendencies in them. They may not have been activated for some time. So there's 2 levels of the problem, the roots of the problem. One is the deep tendency, and then the actual manifestation. The first one is called the samyojanas. These are the 10 fetters or roots, ropes that bind one. But you're not always pulling against the rope. Sometimes the rope can be quite slack, and you can wander around and forget that you're not free, that you're tied with this rope. And that's when you notice that the rope is that you're constrained by the rope. The fetter is called a hindrances or a nivarana. So when anger is active and you're in anger, that's the nivarana, the hindrance. But when it's latent and has a capacity or potential to arise, that's a samyojana, that's a fetter. So the trick is to say, like, yeah, I haven't been angry for a month. Now have I reached the stage of enlightenment, etc. But then under certain circumstances, anger comes up, and then you have to conclude, well, I'm not free of that particular fetter. So this is an assessment. This could tell you whether, for instance, whether you've hit the 3rd stage of enlightenment. In the 3rd stage of enlightenment, neither anger nor greed arises, even under provocation. But in the first 2 stages of enlightenment, anger and greed can arise. In the first stage, even without provocation. In the second stage, only with provocation. So these are ways to examine it. Now, in the brief time we have here, I'm not going to go into great detail about this, but listen to the talk on the 4 stages of enlightenment on the YouTube channel, and you'll get more detail on that. So self-assessment is perfectly fine. Many people have told me or asked me whether they were enlightened. So some people tell me they're enlightened and others ask me if they're enlightened. What I always say to them is, whatever you think you have achieved, it should feel very good, always ask for more. Don't cheat yourself. Keep going. Keep asking for more because you would not want to overestimate your idea of enlightenment. You should, in fact, err on the side of underestimating your sense of enlightenment. Please underestimate your attainments and ask for more. Don't cheat yourself. Okay, next question, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from Cheryl in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, United States. Should all our meditation efforts be self-guided, or is it beneficial to also utilize guided meditations?
Both are very useful, both guided and self-guided, and one should try both. Some people benefit greatly, in fact, really rely and find it very helpful to have guided meditations. And this day and age, when we have recordings and videos, we can easily call them up any time. That was not the case before recordings in the time of the Buddha. In that time, you would need the voice of another. Now, this is frequently mentioned by the Buddha as a very, very helpful factor in understanding Dhamma or assisting you into a state of deep concentration. That is the voice of another. So while the Buddha was talking to people in his apparently a beautiful modulated voice with great confidence, some people attained to enlightenment even. And so there's a guided meditation that the Dhamma talks themselves were guided meditations and pulled you in, riding on the voice of another. So it can be very useful. But you probably want to not always have to rely on the voice of another because you can't always have somebody talking to you. So you also want to cultivate your own capacity to find your way into these beautiful mental states, and this is what they're called, beautiful. The path, the Eightfold Path, is described by the Buddha as beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. So you're looking for beautiful mental states which are positive emotional states. This is deeply described in the sixth factor called right effort. The elimination and prevention of unwholesome mental states, summarized as the 5 hindrances, and the cultivation, development, and immersion in positive emotional and attitudinal mental states called the 7 factors of enlightenment. So, in brief, that's a little answer to the question. Okay, Pia?
John, our next question is from the live feed from Prasadika. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Thank you from America. In a previous talk, you mentioned that music can help open the heart. I find this true, but I am weary of music being fundamentally a sense pleasure. What are your thoughts?
Yes, having been a musician and no longer being a musician because I'm a monk. Monks are not to indulge in music, listening to music or playing music. And so I gave up music because I preferred meditation. And nobody made me do this. I chose to be a monk on my own initiative after having been a professional musician for some years. I was primarily in classical music. But anyway, yes, music is something, I use that as some people, well, many people love music, and it's a mysterious, what is it? What does it do to your mind? How does this work? And they have beautiful experiences, and it's a refuge for them. So what I try to emphasize for them is that meditation is not music, but it has some of the qualities that music has in terms of what it does to your emotions. So the joy that one experiences in listening to music, or the ease that one experiences, the reduction of distress and suffering in listening to music, and sometimes exalted feelings listening to music, can be used in order to understand what meditation is, and what especially deep meditation, and especially the Samadhi meditations. So we can transfer the qualities of experiences that we've had. We want to know. We need bridges between ordinary worldly experiences, sensory experiences like music, and meditative experiences like samadhi or jhana. The jhanas are described very clearly as joy and ease of body, etc., especially in the first jhana. So we need a bridge to something which is like that. So what we call a simile. Music is a simile for what one could experience in meditation without the music. So this is why I refer to music and so forth as a kind of simile for meditative states. But one must let the music go in order to enter into these states of silence, because there's no music in the meditative states. There's no music. So this is a little answer to that question. Yeah.
Our next question is from Isaiah from Arlington, Virginia, United States. I am intent on becoming an ordained Buddhist monk in the near future, but I don't know where to start. How should one go about becoming a Buddhist monk?
Yes, Isaiah, I think that one must first survey the types of Buddhist practice. Now, when we say become a Buddhist monk, there are many schools of Buddhism. So there's Mahayana Buddhism, there's Zen and Tibetan, etc., Pure Land, all these things. And then there's the Theravada. So you have to first say, now what kind of school are you going to enter into? If you're interested in the Theravada, which is what I am, then you have to do a careful survey. And the reason why is that not all monasteries or monks or teachers, etc., are suitable, especially for a Westerner going into the robes. There are thousands of monks in the world. By the way, the Theravada order of monks is certainly the largest body of monks on the planet, and they amount to hundreds of thousands of monks in the robes, but they're mostly found in Asia, and only in recent times, in the last 50 years or so, do we have well-established monasteries in the West with monks who have studied in the East extensively, practiced in Asian monasteries, and then come back and establish monasteries in the West. So I would say for a Westerner that it's probably good to get exposure, at least initially, to a teacher who is experienced with the culture of the West, who understands the nature of being raised in the West, and has many years of teaching of Western students who have become monks. And so that's where you should start. If you waltz off into the midst of Sri Lanka, Burma, or Thailand, or other countries, other Theravada countries, and you find yourself in a village temple someplace with very little in the way of language skills in the native language, etc., you're going to perhaps waste your time. So that's a kind of a way to begin the search. Those are a few signposts and a few helpful hints on the way. Okay, Pia.
Our next question is from Will Val in San Juan Capistrano, California, United States. My question is about the startle reflex when hearing a loud sound during meditation. I can be watching my breath continuously, and then a car backfires outside my window, which jolts me out of my meditation. Any advice on how to dampen this reflex?
Yes, move to a place where there's just electric cars. There are no cars backfiring in this day and age. And I know, anyway, a little joke. So the startle reflex is one of the most embedded reflexes, and you can be quite meditative in the midst of a kind of a diverse experience of walking down the street, and there's various activities around. You can be quite balanced, and monks have to practice this every day. The Buddha says, monks, keep your mindfulness during your alms round, which means the monks are walking through a village virtually every day, and don't ignore the negative and the positive signs that you see there. Practice sense restraint. Keep yourself equanimous and guarding your sense of well-being and mental health. So that's all very well, and that's hard enough to do, and that will give you a great deal of well-being in life if you can manage to do that in the midst of lay life as well. But still, sudden noises, sudden experiences can trigger this startle reflex, and it's apparently even babies, fairly newborn babies, have the startle reflex. If they're held in the arms and dropped a couple of inches down, they have the startle thing. So it's quite often believed to be non-negotiable, that you can't override this. But I actually have worked on this myself for years, and you can override it. You can teach yourself to not react. But each time you do, how you do this is that you notice the startle, and it's a noise at night usually, and then you have this wave of kind of alert or slight fear come through you, and then you have to say, why am I doing this? Why is this happening? What good does this do? And 999 times out of 1,000, the noise and the reaction it's to nothing. It's the sound of a car backfiring or a thump in the night, and there is no real danger. Perhaps once in a while it really is a danger. In neither situation does the startle reflex help you. What helps you is to react in a sensible way. And so this is what you have to do, is first decide that the startle reflex is not that helpful in an emergency situation. And then you have to practice it. And it's a really interesting practice because you have to be very mindful, and it happens in a split second. But you can reduce it. So there are, exercises for this. There's some psychology tests for this as well. There's a series of experiments with meditators and non-meditators about the startle reflex. And so they have headphones, and they have the sound of a gunshot going off. And people like police officers and soldiers and so forth have these headphones on, and they all exhibit startle reflex. Some meditators manage to disconnect from the startle reflex. But unless the meditator has worked specifically on this for an extended period of time, they also will have that startle reflex. So basically it's a universal experience, but it seems to be possible to disconnect that little circuit. So I wish you good luck with that, and I hope. Unfortunately, the demise of the internal combustion engine will give you less opportunities to be startled. But maybe you can arrange some other exercises for yourself. Okay, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is from Kathy in the live feed. What is the mind? Where does it come from? Does the Buddha explain?
Yes, indeed. There are descriptions of what the mind consists of and what it does. As far as where it comes from, it's pretty well the same answer as about the universe. So the Buddha was asked, is the universe finite in time or infinite in time? Finite in space, infinite in space. And he advised people to set the question aside as unprofitable, that one will not get an answer ultimately to those questions, and that you have some activities to work on that will actually prove beneficial in your life. But the beginning of the mind is also equivalent to the beginning of the universe. It's not possible to know whether it has an ultimate beginning or in time or not. So this thing arrives. Now how we should look at it is that the mind, we have a mind. And the problem with the mind is when you identify it as your mind, you can't, if I ask you, when did you make your mind? How did you make your mind? How do you create your mind? You say, well, I didn't make it. It's just there. So the issue here with the mind is not where it comes from. It's your mistaken idea that it's your mind. And we can plainly see that we have no idea where it came from, even to as much how it works on a personal basis, because a lot of it is out of our control. It does things that we don't know how it does, and we can't manage to control them. So this tells us a lot of important information about our relationship to our own mind. And our relationship to our own mind is one of acknowledging that it's a natural process which we are not the owner of. We are not the ultimate controller of. We are not the inventor of. So this is the practice of what's called anatta, or non-self. So the lack of a self, which is the creator or controller of the mind. If anything, we can say that the mind is the property of Mother Nature, as is the body. The body, we do not make our own body. We don't know how the thing works. It just grows by itself. And people identify with a body, but it's a wrong idea because it's not theirs. Since it's out of their control, it gets sick when you don't want it to get sick. It changes in ways you don't want it to change. It won't listen to you, and neither will your mind. So this is the important aspect of how, in Buddhism, we relate to the body and the mind as not ours, not under our control, not owned by us. And this relieves us of a lot of difficulties, because when you have a sense of ownership of things that distress arises. When something happens, like somebody else's car gets stolen, it's not a problem for you. But when it's your car that gets stolen, then it's a big problem for you. But if your car can be stolen, I guess it's really not your car. You thought it was yours, but when you go out into the parking lot, it's not there, and somebody else has taken it for a joyride. Well, it turns out the papers that you signed that told you it was yours are just provisional. It's not really yours because you don't really control it. You can't command it. And so it's the relationship of control and mine, I, me, and mine, to the things around you and your body and your mind that is the source of distress. as we become more comfortable with the idea that you own nothing, then you have nothing to lose and your anxiety is dissolved as well. That is a very complex thing in brief, but let's move on to the next question, Pia.
Ajahn, our next question is also from the live feed from Christina. In case I'm lucky and find myself conscious at the time of my death, which do you advise me to do? Enjoy the company of my loved ones, or meditate, or meditate mindfulness meditation?
Yes. So you have two options there. One is to be available to your loved ones and feel the comfort of loving kindness, which is a form of meditation, a very useful one, which more people have access to than pure mindfulness. But of course, mindfulness is present in loving kindness, and it is present in spades. It is a very important aspect of loving kindness, so you're being both mindful and loving in it. One of the worst things one can be is alienated or angry at your relatives and friends near the end. That's unwise, but then one dies angry and alone, and so it is much better to say, thank you for the company. I appreciate your efforts and our relationship, and relax in a sense of ease and safety. So this is actually one of the benefits of loving kindness, is one dies without confusion. So please listen to my talk on the 11 benefits of loving kindness. And the last of the benefits is one dies without confusion. If one has practiced loving kindness, it comes to your rescue near the time of death.
Ajahn, our next question is from Cheryl in Port Townsend, Washington, United States. Can you describe a day in the life of the community while the monastery is closed to visitors? Do you continue to meet as a group for morning and evening pujas and/or practice on your own? Are there any projects of note that are happening or being planned?
Yes, I'm happy to give you a little update. So the present community, which is since the time the pandemic started in March of 2020, I believe it was, arrived in Canada, and we were at that time in a jhana retreat. So we had visitors here. There was probably, 15 or 20 people in residence at the time. And actually I had heard about the meditators had no access to the news. So they didn't know about this this virus outbreak. And I didn't tell them about it. So when the retreat ended, I said, well, there's news, and you're going to have to go back to a world which is in a pandemic. And now we had to decide what to do. Can we stay open? Shall we close? What shall we do? So we decided that we would close to visitors. And we had about 10 or 11 people in residence at the time. And we've been closed the last 18 months or 19. I don't know how long it is, but now, anybody tell me how long it is? 19 months. So the 10 or 11 people is the constant population of the monastery. And one person goes out once a week for groceries and picks things up in town, and is careful. And so we've managed to come through without any infections or anything like this. And for most people, I suppose it's been stressful. Some people, it's been a positive experience for, but I think in a monastery is particularly suited for quarantine, for this kind of thing. It's almost an ideal situation for us to be isolated. This is the nature of monastery life. And because we're all in the same monastery, we're all aware of our hygiene and all this, then we don't need to mask at all in the monastery. Only if somebody goes out to certain things do they need a mask. But we're we're a pretty well an isolated community, and we have all the skills for that. So again, Birken Monastery, for those who don't know, is quite remote and off-grid in the middle of a forest, and we're not surrounded by people at all, and so we severed the opportunity for visitors to show up or enter the community, and we locked down in that sense, and it's very harmonious. Situation is everybody is a meditator here. It's quite seasoned meditator. At the moment, we have 3 monks and 1 Mechi, Sister Mon, in residence, and we also have another monk who will be returning to the community, and so we'll have about 4 or 5 monastics in residence, and they're all very senior. I guess all of us are more than 20 years in the robes, and now we have 5 or 6, sometimes 7 stewards, lay people who run the monastery as well, and they're all seasoned veterans of living in monasteries. So we do quite well. We don't have a problem with being unable to go dancing. We don't feel confined, really. We're actually in a very ideal situation, so we're fortunate. As far as formal meetings, we continue our formal, like our meal, and we have regular meetings such as tea times and these kind of media things. But we have not been, the whole community has not been doing morning and evening pujas or meditations. I've given everybody the opportunity to experiment on their own. Some people like to do the morning meetings, and they show up and have little groups and so forth, whatever they want. And others enjoy just the freedom of the schedule to meditate whenever they have an opportunity in the monastery. And so it's a very nice thing. We have these scheduled meetings have been going on since the beginning, which is it's 27 years now. We've been at this location for 20 years, and most of the time we're always doing retreats or having regular morning and evening meetings, and so it's a opportunity, and that's more or less to support the guests that come here. So the monastery has accommodation for about 25 people in a very comfortable way, 25 people, and normally we ebb and flow between 15 to 25 people, and it's kind of continuously having retreats and daily schedules and so forth. So this is a break from that. But we've transferred our energies into this video format on YouTube and on podcasts. And the pandemic has forced a lot of people to do this, is to communicate at a distance. And so this is not necessarily a negative experience. This is why you're here today listening. And this is part of the positive side of this. We've had to rely more or less on distant communication at a distance and so forth, and it has many benefits. We are we're happy to stay with our pattern until it's reasonable to behave in another way. We're not in any great rush to get over the pandemic. I mean, it seems to be going on, and we're happy to conform with the general guidelines. We're in British Columbia, and there's all kinds of health regulations. There's vaccine passports and Vaccination, I think this is perhaps one of the highest rates of vaccination in the world in British Columbia, into the high 90s, 90%, more than 90% of the population is vaccinated now. And so everybody in the monastery is vaccinated, double vaxxed, and now awaiting for the, what do they call it? The booster shot, yes. We're happy to conform with this. I just follow the mainstream medical advice. I don't have any esoteric ideas about this. I'm listening to the government and the mainstream medical directions, and I'm happy to cooperate. And in the meantime, life is quite normally monastic. In fact, in some ways, it's quite good. I don't know whether this is disappointing to others, but we're having a whale of a time here. And what we're trying to do is share our ways of helping to get through this situation, which is very unique in history, in the world history. This is the largest pandemic in history. And the reason why is there's more people on the planet than it ever has been in the past. So there's nearly 8 billion people, and there's endless international travel. And so this is unique in history. There was a worldwide pandemic 100 years ago, the Spanish flu, killed 50 million people at least. But that was a different time with a much smaller population. And so this is, this is a time unique. So you will be remembering it and telling your kids and your grandchildren all about the big pandemic and how you managed it. So we're all in this together. We do whatever we can for you to get through it without any excess emotional distress. And we ourselves are very harmonious in the monastery. There's not much in the way of melodrama. There's meditation and a lot of goodwill and production of things. And we have appreciated support from the external world. We've been kept going through donations and even food offerings through the mail and things like this. So highly appreciative that people remember that the monastery does rely on donations, and that's its only source of income, and it has continued through the pandemic. So people they're aware of it, and they think, whoa, the monastery is normally a retreat center, and now there's no availability, so I hope it's doing well, so they donate and so forth to keep us going. So that's kind of a little summary of how we're doing now. And we will see how this goes. This could be over in a few months, or it could go on for years. Who knows? Okay, next question.
Ajahn, our next question is from Diane from Western Australia. How does one's sila protect you? How does the Dhamma protect you? Especially if one hasn't developed enough emotional... Especially if one hasn't developed enough emotional development yet and still gets entangled in emotional upheaval. Thank you.
Well, sila is outward behavior, and so people get in trouble by killing and stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, frivolous speech, and by indulging in intoxication and drugs. How easy it is to get in trouble. So just following those guidelines, it's like just a good parent is just telling you, now dear, don't be violent, don't Be peaceful. Don't kill people. Don't you steal. Be careful with your sex life. Don't be a liar. And please, don't be a drug addict or a alcoholic. It just makes a dreadful life for you and for everybody else. So, what sensible advice is this? Person who is trustworthy, that is you don't have to be afraid of, that's not going to kill you, that is not going to steal from you, that honors your integrity, etc., and doesn't lie to you. This is the type of person that are helpful and good citizens. So this is how it protects you. And the next stage is to back up these good behavior with good emotions. So the emotional part is harder than the outward behavior. But developing a good heart is, of course, profoundly protective of you. It makes you without fear. So if you have generosity and kindness and clarity, then you have you live a fearless life. And this protects you. And if you can cultivate a deep sense of goodwill and loving kindness, you'll find that the fear even of death starts to fall away. And so this is how you are protected in some ways from death, because you lose your fear. And so, what do they say? A coward dies 1,000 deaths. A brave person dies but once. We want to go even beyond bravery. We want to go to fearlessness. And fearlessness is a positive state of loving kindness, of goodwill, of generosity. Generosity is another form of bravery, Instead of living in terror of that you might lose your stuff, you walk through the world as a person who is brave enough to think, well, I have stuff, I can share it. And not only that, I'm delighted to share it. And I will face whatever it takes to get what I need and get enough to support myself and help others. So it's a brave attitude. It's a good attitude. And so this is how the nature of sila, or good behavior, virtuous behavior, protects you and also protects others. Yes. So we have perhaps time for one more question.
Ajahn, our final question is from Juan from Liverpool, United Kingdom. If one practices and masters anapanasati over years without focusing too much on the other aspects of the Eightfold Path, what would eventually happen? Can yogis get that wisdom, anicca, dukkha, anatta, through samadhi, as they also reach the jhanas through their own techniques? Why then did they not reach the Four Noble Truths after they've been meditating hours for centuries?
Yes, a very good question. And it's one of those areas that is of great confusion out there, but I explain many, many times with this, and it is that the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path is samadhi, is sama samadhi. The seventh factor is samasati, which means right mindfulness. So one is not, when one practices anapanasati, now the word sati, so mindfulness of breathing in and breathing out, it's not simply mindfulness, it's right mindfulness, samasati. And in order for it to be samasati, means that you already are informed about the Four Noble Truths, and they give rise to right view. And right view gives rise to right intention, which gives rise to right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and then right mindfulness. And which gives rise to right samadhi. So it's not merely samadhi itself, it's right samadhi or sama samadhi, which naturally leads to insight into anicca, dukkha, anatta, the three characteristics which liberate you. And so this is where the confusion happens. There are schools of Buddhism that are kind of wary of the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path. They dwelling on mindfulness and saying there's no need to cultivate samadhi. That's a kind of thing that yogis do, and it doesn't go anywhere. But pardon me, how on earth is it that the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path is specifically samadhi? It is because it is samma samadhi, that is concentration or absorption, blissful concentration and absorption, is at the service of right understanding. And so that's why it is valuable, necessary part of the path, and why the Buddha included it, and why it's not something that one should dismiss. And so that's the difference. It's the difference between samma samadhi, right serenity or concentration or absorption, and merely concentration or absorption. So this, I have been talking about this for 15 years until everybody's sick of it now. But I talked about it one more time. So take note of this, and particularly if you want to hear more about this, go back to my talks on right effort. I give a whole, I don't know how many talks, at least 10, 12 talks on right effort, and then right concentration as well, including jhana, and why it's important to understand its place in the Eightfold Path and how it works, etc. So here we are at the end of our talk today, and we seem to have started off with absence of sound, but we recovered our equanimity and went on. So that's it for today.